This episode is sponsored by Custom Ink. Custom Ink brings people together with custom gear, from employees and customers to teammates and friends. At their easy-to-use website, you can create personalized custom gear, including water bottles, backpacks, polos, jackets, and so much more. And it's all backed by a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Get started today. Visit customink.com. That's customink.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Rams Up, your favorite LA Rams podcast. You can also follow us on YouTube. Got some great video content. Our YouTube handle is at LA Rams Up. You can follow us on Instagram as well. I'm your host, Mark. Let's get to it. Welcome back, Ram fans, and has it been a crazy weekend or what? Went into the weekend with a lot going on already. The biggest news, of course, Leonard Floyd getting cut, and then on top of that, Coleman Shelton opting out of the second year of his contract, Allen Robinson still looking for a trade apparently, and this is how my weekend went. I had a new guest on board Saturday, did a nice little recording, Scott Richmond, a longtime Ram fan, and we talked about what the Rams are going to do moving forward, shaping this roster for 2023. I was going to post it this morning, Monday morning, and I was doing another recording session with my regular guests, Paul Walia and Tom Courts, and as we were recording that, my phone started to jump off my desk with text messages about this Jalen Ramsey trade. So our conversation segued into a lot of talk about that trade. So we are going to share that conversation this episode. We talk about all things Rams, but a lot about Jalen Ramsey and that trade the Rams made. So check that out. We talk about Wagner, Floyd, and all these other guys as well. And in a little early peek at what the Rams might do in the draft, and maybe some slightly differing opinions on what Rams fans can expect in this upcoming 2023 season. I'm going to get back to the Scott Richmond interview. That'll be on the following episode. Good stuff there too. Scott's a very knowledgeable guy, especially well informed on how college players will translate to the NFL. Lots of good stuff, so check that out in a couple of days here. I don't want to spend too much time on other stuff going on. The Derek Carr signing, the Panthers trading up to number 1. Who are they going to pick there? A quarterback for sure, but which one? We'll save that for another day. Let's get to this talk with Paul and Tom, all things Rams, with a special emphasis on this trade and the continuing salary dump and player dump that the Rams are performing as they prepare for the free agency period. Ready for the underdogs, upsets, and the unbelievable action from DraftKings Sportsbook? The biggest tournament in college basketball is almost here. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 on college hoops and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, for a limited time, all customers can score a no-sweat bet during round 1 and 2 of the tournament. Go to the app, opt in, and place a no-sweat bet this weekend. If it doesn't hit, you'll get a bonus bet back up to $10. Now, for me, I'm leaning on the UCLA Bruins. They lost Jalen Clark for the season, perhaps the best defender in the country. But this is a well-coached team. They're very deep. A lot of people are going to be giving up on them, and the odds should reflect that. Don't give up on our UCLA Bruins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and sign up with code TPPN. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly, win or lose. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code TPPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. Hey everybody, the gang is all here once again. I got Paul Walia and Tom Courts, and we're going to talk all things Rams, another roundtable. And I think we have a few things to talk about, that's for sure. How you doing, Tom? You staying dry up there in the Central Valley?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty wet up here, but there's a lot of worse places in the country. A little further north of us in Sacramento, in that area, they're getting a lot of snow, and I guess some snow down south. So, all things
Yeah.
considered, just some rain.
How about you, Paul? What's up with you?
Everything's good out here on the East Coast, holding it down for another off season. But I'm excited. I'm excited. I like what I'm hearing so far when it comes to NFL news.
Hey, before we get started on the Rams, who's your March Madness team, Paul?
Oof, I haven't committed yet. I usually go for an underdog, so I'm waiting to see like who's the Cinderella story, and I'm going to jump on that Cinderella bandwagon.
Yeah, I'm all in on UCLA, but their injuries, they've just got hit by two really painful injuries. I love their team. I love what they're doing. I love their coach, but I think they're up against it with Jalen Clark out and possibly Adam Bona, but we'll see. You're a UCLA guy, aren't you, Tom?
Yeah, proud alum of UCLA, so obviously all in on UCLA, and Arizona looks really good, though. I think that's a really good team. They've got a couple of good future good professionals on that team, and so that was a tough loss last night. But considering, like you said, there's two people down, to have a shot at the win with the last shot was not a bad outcome. But they'll probably end up a 2 seed somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get on to some Ram stuff. That's what people want to hear about. And there's some news swirling as we speak about Jalen Ramsey. So we're going to save that for last. Let's talk about this Leonard Floyd cut. So the way I look at this is it just really accentuates the fact that the Rams are going to have to go edge early in the draft. That unit right now is scary thin and unproven. How do you feel about that, Tom? You agree?
Yeah, I mean that's very thin. There's a lot of thin spots on this roster right now. But yeah, just to step back for a second on the Leonard Floyd cut and why they didn't perhaps uh, push it out to a June 1st, where the cap hit would have been a lot lower. They wouldn't have gotten obviously the cap, that $3 million relief initially, but there's a lot of ways they could have gotten under the cap with some restructures and things like that. To guys like Cup, Cup and so forth. But to me the cut and taking that $18 million cap hit and saving only three this year really is the first, and the Bobby Wagner actually was the first indicator, but this is the second indicator that they're really not looking to really push for a championship in the upcoming year. They're going to take as much as they can in this year, and then retool and have one last go at it in 2024. So I think that's the theme of what they're doing. That's the backdrop of what all their moves are. And if they can, maybe make the playoffs, that'd be really a win this year. But I really think they're kind of going for a 500 season at best, and we'll loading up for 2024. So that's my early take on what the strategy is for the upcoming season, and I think a lot of the moves that we see will play into that narrative.
Yeah, it's kind of like take it on the chin in 2023 and gear up for 2024. Although I still think they could be pretty competitive this year. How about you, Paul? Are you in the same line of thinking?
Leonard Floyd is interesting because remember he was handpicked by Staley. They signed him on Staley's recommendation because he fit perfectly to that defense, right? Uh, Unbelievable run defender, shut down that side. He made Staley's defense work. So it's a interesting move. Obviously, there are some very positive cap scenarios that come out of this, but Leonard Floyd is going to be a hard player to replace, particularly at linebacker. That is one position where the Rams are paper thin, and so it's going to be interesting to see if Raheem Morris goes to more of like a 4-3 look, more so than a 3-4 look. He does play like that sort of hybrid scenario, situational defense anyway. Uh, that might minimize a little bit, but he's going to be a hard figure to replace.
Yeah, and just to hit on your question there, the Rams are very thin at that position, right? We have under contract second year Daniel Hardy, second year Keir Thomas, and of course, Michael Hoyt is a restricted free agent. So he'll probably, of course, be back. But that's very young, very thin at that position, and I can see them targeting that position heavily in the first with their first pick.
Hey, I just got notified of the trade, the terms of the trade. I think this is official, so maybe we should just segue into Jalen Ramsey right now. The trade is now agreed to per sources. The Dolphins get Pro Bowl cornerback Jalen Ramsey. The Rams get the Dolphins' 2023 third-round pick, number 77 overall, and tight end Hunter Long. And that's it. Trade will be processed Wednesday when the league year begins. Now, I'm a little disappointed in the return on that deal. Obviously, the Rams taking it on the chin again to free up some cap space, but in return for Jalen Ramsey, a third-round pick, and tight end Hunter Long, does anyone know? Can anyone chime in on Hunter Long's skill set?
I'm doing a background check on him right now.
Yeah, real time.
And again, this is another position we're going to be thin at. Perhaps it reduces the likelihood that they'll draft a tight end, although there are a lot of good ones. I would think that this puts Tyler Higbee's career at risk with the Rams anyways. And it also means cornerback becomes a big area of need as well, given that they have a couple of rookies coming back for their second year. And, that's a bit really. Should be interesting. Are you disappointed with that? Are you disappointed with what we got back on that trade at first look, Paul?
Well, I think Hunter Long will be depth from what I'm reading on him. He was expected. The Miami Herald had an interesting article on him. I just went through it really quickly, but about him having a larger role because of Gesicki's departure. But, if we think about it this way, so now you got, my personal favorite, Bryson Hopkins. I would love to see him hit the field. And I know Tom Courts is patiently awaiting Higbee's release. So maybe this might signal maybe Hopkins gets a little bit more PT and maybe a Higbee move is coming, or we might get the reverse. We might get now maybe that's Higbee sticking around because of maybe they don't have confidence in Hopkins to handle the role. But we'll see how it plays out. It's interesting. The 77 pick overall in return, for Ramsey, considering his contract, not too bad. But you're right. We're hoping to get a little bit more. But
so they're up to 11 picks now. How do you feel about it, Tom? First reaction?
Well, first reaction is disappointed in the return on the draft picks. But if you consider Hunter Long, he was a third round draft pick in 2021. So you could think of it as 2/3 if you value Hunter Long as a true third. 2/3, and they use one of those on a tight end that's got a couple of years under his belt in experience. I think they had to move on, right? So that's the best offer they got. So if that tells you anything about how people view Jalen Ramsey out there in the marketplace, that's what it tells me more than anything.
And think about now the Rams secondary scenario, particularly at cornerback. Talk about paper thin. It's another position that's paper thin.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this at the end, but they now have a second and 2/3. What would they do with those picks? Would they possibly try to move up into the first round, or could they possibly accumulate more picks, move back into the fourth? But there's two area needs now that are just so obvious: edge and cornerback. Whatever picks they end up with, I can't help but think those picks are going to be edge and cornerback. Although my other guest, Scott Richmond, who we'll hear from, he feels like quarterback's really deep in this draft, and you can actually get some good ones later. So maybe that's what they'll do. Allen Robinson given permission to seek a trade. I haven't heard much on that front. I don't expect that we would get much back for Allen Robinson at this point, or if the trade's even going to happen. How do you feel about a proposed Allen Robinson trade? I don't think it has a big impact on our wide receiver group. I think we'll be, a pretty decent group there with or without him. What would you expect to get back for Allen Robinson, Tom? And do you think that trade's going to happen?
I wouldn't expect to get anything back for Allen Robinson. I expect to pay to move him. So we might get like a, who knows, a 6th or a 7th or something like that. And we pick up some of the salary. It's just
that's what I was thinking too. A late round pick this year or next.
Yeah, it's a bad contract. Obviously, that was a huge mistake. A very, sort of a gut wrench reaction last year after losing out on re-signing
OBJ.
Yeah, no. I'm sorry. To the Bills.
Von Miller going to the
Bills. Von Miller. Yeah. On losing out on Von Miller, they immediately within hours shifted toward that move, and it was an emotional move, and it was a big mistake in retrospect. And then how they used him was even just made it even worse, right? Putting him out on the edge in isolation. It's just not the Rams game. It's not their game. I mean, they might put a speed guy out there, but to stem the field, but they weren't going to use him as a 50-50 guy, except maybe in the red zone. And just didn't move, never moved him inside, let Kupp do his thing. It was a disaster all around. It's terrible.
I like Allen Robinson. I think the contract was a bit excessive, I was sort of puzzled by the size of that contract. But I like Allen Robinson. One thing that stands out in my mind is this. Your best wide receiver is coming back off an ankle injury, right? And this really is a cut your losses move because of the size of the contract. However, if he does stick around, I think it'll be positive for the Rams because I think one of the things that goes on is that I think people underestimate injuries in the NFL. So when a player is coming back off an injury, they automatically assume, oh, he'll be fine for the upcoming season. I take a little bit, different view. I'd say let them hit the field first and let them show you that they can hold up, particularly when you talk about a wide receiver and an ankle. So I would like Allen Robinson to stick around if they can work it out because of, Cooper Kupp. And then, they do have a strong wide receiver core if you put them together. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I almost feel like if we're only going to get a 6th or 7th round pick for him, maybe just better off keeping him. And talk briefly about the Bobby Wagner loss. And I don't really find it that impactful. I mean, I love Bobby Wagner. He's a tackling machine. But in this defense and with the guys we got back to Ernest Jones, really just Ernest Jones, a couple of exclusive rights guys backing him up. I think we can find a decent backup in the draft and we'll be okay at that position. Do you agree, Paul?
Yeah, I think when you watched, it was tough to watch. Wagner, and we talk about Allen Robinson not being used appropriately. Wagner was not used appropriately. His numbers were great, but when you look beyond the numbers, really, you could just see it on when you watch the games that the system wasn't really and Bobby Wagner weren't really a good fit. Bobby Wagner's a great player. Has no issue with Bobby Wagner. It was just the scheme that was utilized and how he was, how he fit within that scheme was not a well suited for one another. Middle linebacker, or inside linebacker. In the NFL is changing. Pass coverage is becoming more and more valuable. So, and you're right. I think if you take a look at free agency, you take a look at the draft, there's a lot of talent there. And I think Ernest Jones is a star in the making. And a chance for him to get some more playing time, I think, is only going to highlight that this season.
Well, you, Tom? You worried about Bobby Wagner moving on?
No, I would have liked him to stay. I think they just did him a solid. I think, as I said before, if the Rams were in a position to be all in this year, they're not even in a position to do it. So if they were in a position to do it, and that was their intention, then I think he would have stuck around. But he wants to go to a place where he can win. And he didn't want to be in a rebuilding scenario. He thought that's what he was entering last year. It didn't turn out that way. I think he moves on. He did them really a solid in helping to keep that team together when McVay sort of checked out. He was the one that really stepped up, I think, as you read everything that went on, and they just did him a solid and let him move on.
Yeah, I'd expect them to use a middle to late round pick on an inside linebacker, middle linebacker, and we'll get into the draft another day, but I'm not too worried about him moving on.
The guys there, Ernest Jones, we talked about, but then the other, I don't think Travin Howard's an unrestricted free agent. He was just a hurt all year long. He was on the 48. Can you believe this? Travin Howard was on the 48-man roster one time last year out of 17. One time.
Yeah.
Even there, Christian Roseboom, Jake Hummel, and Jake Gervais are a bunch of special teams guys that are in line there. So there is no alternatives. There is no second inside linebacker. That's a key position, and I think right up there with the edge on what they're going to target.
I'm hoping that teams take a look at Lavonte David's age and they sort of look past him, and I'm hoping the Rams can get him in at a decent number because I think he'd be a nice compliment at inside linebacker for the Rams. That veteran leadership that Bobby Wagner brought was very, very valuable for the Rams. You saw that because that was a tough season. Somebody like David would fit in really, and Raheem Morris would just love him. I mean, they're perfect. I mean, they know each other. There's familiarity there, and the scheme fit is just phenomenal.
Okay, we've talked about Ramsey, and we'll probably talk about him again some more here before we check out Allen Robinson, Leonard Floyd, Bobby Wagner. I was really disappointed, surprised about this Coleman Shelton deal. I did not know about this, that he had the ability to opt out of his second year, and which he did. He becomes an unrestricted free agent, and all offseason I'd been penciling him in as a potential starter at center, a starter at guard if we stick with Brian Allen, or draft a center. He just gave us so much flexibility along that offensive line, and that's the unit that, it probably created the most frustration last season for sure, right? Because of all the injuries. And we may be able to bring him back, but it really complicates things. This offensive line, we could talk all day about it, but Coleman Shelton possibly gone. Is that how much does that concern you, Paul?
So remember Austin Corbett from the Browns? I got another name
right.
from the Browns. Ethan Pochik, time to bring him in. He's a great center. He's a big center. He's proven durable. He's proven capable. I think he's a better fit for the Rams. I don't know about the Brian Allen scenario. He's a great player, has not been able to stay healthy, but it's time to bring in Ethan Pochik from, I think he'd be a great free agent signing. The only difference is that he's very, very popular. There's a lot of free agent buzz around him. I don't know what that number is going to look like, but I think he'd be a great fit for the Rams.
Yeah, this offensive line is just going to be a crazy remake. I have a feeling. What are you going to say, Tom?
Yeah, there's a lot of good free agents out there. Again, just going back to the theme this year, I really feel like anybody they sign, any free agents they sign, it's been their history, and I think it's going to really stand even more so this year. That unless there's a very inexpensive unrestricted free agent that they can get on a deal, I don't think they're going to really sign any. And I think it's going to, unless it's somebody that can be a long-term player like a Brian Burns, they had, to take over sort of after Donald leaves or something like that. They'll invest in that kind of a free agent, but I think they'll prefer to do it via trade just because of the comp pick scenarios. But so I think that they're going to target roster cut players, right? Under like at the Bobby Wagner last year and so forth. And a guy that's out there at center is Ben Jones from Tennessee, was cut. That's the kind of player I think that they pick up.
Yeah, the offensive line, if you try to propose what their offensive line is going to look like right now, it's almost impossible. You don't know what they're thinking about, how they feel about Noteboom coming back as a left tackle. Lyric Jackson, is he the guy? Are they going to sign a released left tackle, bring him in? It's just we can only guess at this point.
I
But
think
I sure,
I think Kansas City. What happened last year with Kansas City, the Tyreek Hill move, in my opinion, I think the Rams should really take a look at that, because I think Kansas City made a terrific statement that sometimes it's better to get four really good players instead of one elite player, right? Depending on how you make up your roster. And if you look at the Super Bowl with the Eagles and Kansas City, that's really what it was. It wasn't a lot of super elite players that were added during to the roster. It was a lot of really good to very good players that were so you had a solid roster across the board. And when the Rams won their trophy, that's what their roster looked like. So, and absolutely, the post-draft cuts really dictate, I think, the bulk of the Rams' moves. But for offensive line, the Rams learned a valuable lesson last year. That's not where you try to save money. That's where you spend money. Because if you want to throw the ball 600 times like we know McVay wants to, that's not a place where you want to start bringing in guys that are, on the sort of like on the lower side of the continuum. So I think if the Rams are going to earmark where to spend money, right, because they're still not sure about Nopum. So if you read that report on Nopum, I was sort of shocked that, and it caused it to the Achilles, obviously, right? They're still not sure about Nopum. So you already got a question mark. You have three guys, Alaric's coming back with the blood clot scenario, and you saw the press conference. So O-line is still a major question mark. So if I were the Rams, I would go early, solve that scenario early, because that's really going to dictate your season.
yeah, our guest Scott, he compared it to 2017. I think your strategy would be similar to that. In 2017, they brought in Whitworth and John Sullivan.
Yeah. And look at Whitworth.
Presto,
Whitworth
problem
was a
solved.
stabilizing force.
Yeah, I think what Tom is saying is you think that this year they would more likely find street free agents, basically release players with an eye towards next year, making a run. Obviously, try to fill the holes as best they can this year, but no big free agent signings anywhere. Really, is that what you're saying, Tom?
I think that they'll again. I don't think that they're going to be in the UFA market with again, unless it's somebody that can be a long term deal that can really help them in 2024 and beyond. They're not going to do anything that just solidifies this year. But yeah, so it's going to either be a cornerstone player or they're going to go with the street free agents to fill the gaps and try and find some value there, right? I mean, there's already some pretty good street free agents out there. I don't know what their value is going to be on the free market, but there's some Donovan Smith, left tackle, was cut by Tampa Bay. There's some guys out there.
Lawan, right? He was released by the Titans, was it?
He was at least outright they have him listed as.
And he's a guy that has injury concerns, and he's getting up there in years. So I'm not proposing that he's an answer, but just another guy.
Damian Wilson was released outright too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I guess I had never really considered that the Rams might put a franchise tag on Matt Gay. And going along with your line of thinking, Tom, taking it on the chin in 2023, it makes sense that they're not going to spend $4 or $5 million on a kicker. They'll find a street free agent or find a kicker somewhere. But if they are going to make a run this year, be in playoff contention, I felt so good about having Matt Gay back there kicking field goals, so consistent and reliable. Not necessarily a giant leg, but I have a hard time believing they're going to be able to bring him back at this point.
Yeah, I think that they'll figure out a way to bring him back, give him a little bit, maybe another year or two, then maybe another team would with a little lower hit. For whatever reason, it seems like these special teams players tend to re-sign with their own teams, and I don't know why that is. It's maybe we're just talking the difference between $2 and $3 million or $3 and $4 million isn't that significant. So for the team, but it's significant for the player. So I have a good feeling about his coming back, but we'll see.
Are you in the Matt Gay camp, Paul? Are you you want him to come
I am
back?
fully entrenched in the Matt Gay camp. Kickers translate to wins directly, right?
Yeah.
You get 2 words, Adam Vinatieri. Remember that? Ask the Patriots how valuable he was as right.
Yeah.
You know,
It's interesting that as obviously Greg the Leg had a more powerful
yeah.
leg than Matt Gay, but I tell you, I think I was more nervous with Greg than I am with Matt Gay on a 42-yarder.
Matt Gay's
That's
clutch. That's the bottom line.
yeah,
So it
right.
translates directly to W. So they have to find a way to bring Matt Gay back, and that's not an easy thing to find. Although Cameron, remember our buddy Cameron Dicker, the kicker. So he
Yeah,
did actually
right.
look really, really good. So he's also another possibility. But I am fully entrenched in the Matt Gay camp.
So here's a thought. What I'll start with you, Paul, this question. Right now the Rams have 11 picks in the draft. Would you expect them to try to move up, possibly lose picks to get up into the first round, maybe move picks to get up into the fourth round? Or do you think that they're going to stand pat, try to draft 11, maybe even add picks, 12, 13 players? I don't know if it's really intelligent to bring in 13 rookies in one year, but which direction do you think they're going to go?
So, this draft is interesting. I think when people first looked at this draft, I think there were a lot of people that were like, hey, this is not a deep draft. And at certain key positions are absolutely correct. There's not a lot of flash and pizzazz in this draft. However, if you look at this draft, there are some key positions that there's great depth. I think what the Rams should do. So if you take a look now, I just added in 77 to the Rams. They got 36, 69, 77. So they got 3 in the top 100, right? I think what they should do, those are some really solid picks. If they can amass some more, that's great. And try to get as many picks as possible in the top 125. And bring in, just like what I just mentioned earlier, right? Bring in some quality players. If you want to do a roster rebuild, the way to do it is through youth and to do it with quality players. And there are a lot of really good players that fill immediate needs for the Rams. And that's the key. And I think, the hard part about the scenario with the draft is that if you draft, we need X to play here, you're going to have a bad draft. What you have to do is bring in young guns that can play, regardless of the position, right? Bring in quality players. And I think if you can amass as many picks as you can in the top 125, right, which I think is very viable, because if you look what the Rams have, they have three in the 5, 3 in the 6 now. And like I said, they have 36, 69, and 77. And if
So
you
you're talking about maybe packaging a fifth and
moving
sixth
down,
rounder
yeah,
or whatever
absolutely.
and getting into the fourth
Stay where
round.
you are, 36, 69, 77. I think that's really, really good. And see if you can get another one in the top 125 or another 2 in the top 125. So let's see what's out there. There's some great names, and I know we're not talking draft today. I just want to throw out this one name. Kalijah Clancy is an Aaron Donald, like a mini Aaron Donald. This kid from Pitt. If the Rams must bring this kid onto the roster because they need a pass rush in the worst way, and this kid has all the makings. Obviously, early on a rotational pass rusher, but has all the makings of being a legit NFL star. This kid looks really good.
Now he would be characterized as a defensive end more than an edge rusher. Is that
yeah,
true?
he's a D tackle. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
But I
On
think
the light side,
him,
like 280-ish, I think.
Yeah, he's 280, 6'1", but if you watch his tape, man, holy moly. The hand usage, the quickness off the ball, it's like you're literally throwing 99 on this kid. It looks like you're watching Aaron Donald at Pitt again. It's actually a really nice fit.
I think he was probably a month ago, he was probably going to be our second or third rounder. I think he may have elevated himself into the first round.
You watch that tape, yep.
Yeah. How about you, Tom? What do you do with 11 draft picks at this point?
I don't think they trade out. I don't think they move up like you're talking. I mean, unless there's somebody that they just absolutely love. But less need is much more likely to trade down and get more people and get more bodies and that seems to be his MO. I think that they want to load up on, they want to load up on bodies. They know it to some degree. It's a numbers game, right? If what it's sort of a half to a third, and then as you move down the list, your hit rate on literally viable long term players that can start and contribute to your team other than special teams. It's pretty low. It starts at around 50% in the top echelons of the first round, and then drops down from there pretty precipitously. So I think from a numbers game perspective, they go with the numbers over the sort of targeting that one player and packaging and moving up.
With the numbers game in mind, I did a little experiment on the NFL mock draft database simulator just this morning over my second cup of coffee, and I said I'm going to accept every trade if it gives me a pick in the same round, and any additional picks are this year, not next year. And
Right.
I think I accepted 5 or 6 trades, and I ended up drafting 16 players.
Right.
I was really happy with the results. I mean, it was pretty incredible. I think I got one player at minimum at every position group except for special teams. I drafted a quarterback, a running back, a tight end, 2 edge rushers, 2 cornerbacks, a safety, and on and on and on. But then I just got to wondering, what would, if you're drafting guys, you're drafting them, you're expecting them to make the roster, you're hoping they make the roster. And what would that camp look like with 16 drafted rookies walking in and probably another 10 or 11 undrafted free agents? I'll tell you this, it would be one heck of a competitive camp, that's for sure. But I just don't know, what that roster would look like if you really had that many rookies, drafted rookies coming in. I don't know. That would be
It would look like this past season, because if you have any injuries, you're toast, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
people that you're bringing in can't play the NFL.
Yeah, and the Rams are one team that generally do not rush their rookies.
Right.
They have guys sit for a year and learn the trade. And Tom, maybe you know a little bit more about this. There's guaranteed money for drafted rookies, and with 16 drafted rookies, would that be a load on the salary cap? Or I guess the option is paying second or third year guys. Here's a question, and I apologize if you need to do homework on this, but is a 6th round draft pick more of a load on your salary cap than a second year undrafted?
No, not at all. They're all making the minimum at that point in time. The only players that are a load of any significance on your salary cap are the the first rounders in particular.
They're the ones that get so-called slotted.
Yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
that's one of the reasons the Rams stay away from those guys, is that they're literally 4 years on your cap, and they're a 50% hit rate. So that's why they trade those picks away, and for proven guys that they know can contribute right away. And then there's a lot of other benefits of doing that. Notably, that most of the time the other team has picked up a lot of the front loaded salaries and the guarantee side, so they come pretty cheap. So that's a summary of why the Rams do that. But the answer to your question is no. Once you get quite frankly, into the second round, there's almost zero difference in salary cap impact on rookies.
Right. And which is why a lot of the really good teams, when it comes to roster construction, they're focusing on those numbers that start like number 40 to 125. To them, that's really where the bang for your buck is. That's where those players, those numbers from 40 to 125. That's why when you do your mock draft simulator, anybody below 40, you get the draft offers. That's why.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but so Tom, you'd be okay with drafting 16 guys?
I mean, I'm about 16, but I do think to your point though, that they're right now as we sit here at this moment in time, even including the trade, we knew that assuming Allen Robinson gets traded, which I think he will, I think they're going to load him for whatever they can get, quite frankly, that they have 37 rostered players, right? That could make, that are likely to be on this team next year. And so, and there's a couple guys in there that might not even make the team. So, you're talking about 17 players, right? There's some exclusive rights free agents and the restricted free agents that will probably get re-signed, no doubt about it. But this is going to be a very young roster. The Leonard Floyd thing, just, the Rams, everybody's talking about the cash, but the Rams don't worry about cash. They're not cash management guys, right? They spend whatever they need to spend if they think that they are going to get a bang for their buck out of it. So I think that they're clearing space for very inexpensive players this year, and it's going to be and one of the reasons they're going to do that is I think that they are saying, hey, we're not really going for it this year, right? So let's clear everything out for the 2024, and that we're going to play a bunch of young guys. You talked about the secondary, Paul, just to use that as an example. Right now, we're looking at Jacoby Durant, Darian Kendrick, and Grant Haley as your guys, right? And then Russ Yeast can kind of fill in on that nickel as well. So, and you got Robert Rochelle, who couldn't even make the team couldn't get any playtime last year. So, I think they're going to go with that group of guys and maybe sign a cut free agent, a street free agent. So my point is, it's going to be a very young team, and they're going to be happy to have a bunch of young first round guys to see who can play and contribute in the following year.
The reality is, if you draft 10 guys and you come away with a draft of 10 guys and you're like, oh man, we nailed it, we love all our guys, and then the reality is that your hit rates maybe 60%. I'm just making up that number, but you know what I'm saying. Very rarely do you hit on all those guys. But if you're drafting 12, 13, 14 guys, there's a likelihood that you're going to have 7, 8 of those guys are going to be, quality NFL players. So that's part of that scenario that I like. Just increases your chances of actually drafting. You just have more opportunities to draft guys that are really going to make it. I just got another text. I'll share this with you. The Rams will take on $19.6 million of dead cap and sending Ramsey to the Dolphins, freeing up $5.6 million. We all knew that already. Miami acquires guaranteed money to Ramsey in 2023, $17 million, 2024, $18.5 million, 2025, $19.5 million. And, if I'm a Dolphin fan, the one thing that concerns me about that is, is Ramsey's play going to deteriorate over these next 2 or 3 years? It's very possible. So that's a little scary from that perspective. You were going to say something, Paul?
Yeah, I think the profile with Ramsey is not so much the play. I think you bring up a good point, is that he's hard to manage from a coaching standpoint. And you saw a little bit of it last year, right? There were a couple, we don't want to use the term bonehead plays, but you start to see more and more of that as he's on your team. Like the first year, he'll be great. He'll be disciplined. You can manage him really well. And then you start to see it sort of deteriorate as time goes on. And I think that's I think all the Ram fans knew by game 13 that, oh boy, Ramsey's like digging himself a hole right now, the way, his attitude and everything else. And we knew this was going to happen. You know how we knew this was going to happen? If you go back a couple of podcasts that we had, when we said that he was starting his own podcast, remember what we all did?
Oh, right.
We all did a collective sigh. We were like, oh, that's the last thing we need him to do. So that's the thing with Ramsey, is that it's, we know he's a quality player. We know he's a great player. He's like, how do you find cornerbacks with that skill set? It's so rare. But he's just really hard to manage.
Yeah, and you're right. There were a couple of games where he made mistakes that really cost us. And if you want him to be a shutdown corner, I think he can do that. The problem is, does he want to do that? Does he want to be the guy that is shutting down a wide receiver all day long, but not really making the splash plays that he wants to make, for television sake, really. Tom, do you agree? How do you feel about, do you think the Dolphins, let's put it this way, do you think the Dolphins made a good deal here? I mean, obviously they only had to give up a draft pick and a tight end, but, how do you feel about that money they're taking on for a cornerback his age?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's probably a fair deal in retrospect. The Rams really wanted to get rid of him, and when you come out and say we're going to trade this player and we're going to take best offer, uh, it really limits your your market, right? And so, but I do think it's good for Miami. They're in a position where they needed some leadership on that defense, and he'll provide that. And so it gives them some swagger, and so but I do think I agree with Paul. It's time for the Rams to move on from Jalen Ramsey. And again, if I keep say every move they make, I'm going to say it. If they were going to try and win this year, they would have never done that. And they're not going to try. They're not trying to win this year. They're trying to win in 2024. And it's what makes they're going to get a lot more money for him this year than they will next year. He's healthy. He had, he's not going to play better next year than he did this year or the year before. He's not getting any better. He's only getting older. And so, eat it now, eat your 19 million and this year, and then move on.
Yeah. And we were wrong, early on, we were wrong when we suspected that they would not trade Ramsey for these reasons. If they were going to cut Floyd, they're going to wait till June 1st. And it's because maybe we were just hoping as Ram fans that they were going to continue to strive for a championship this year. And these are indications that may not be the case, although I still think they're going to be pretty darn competitive. I still think that they have, as Sean McVay said, the pillars there. It's just a matter of winning some close games, winning the games they're supposed to win, and sneaking away with a couple wins and maybe games that last year where they would have lost. How about you, Paul? Any final thoughts on what are your final thoughts of the Rams as of today, where they are, where they're headed? How do you feel as a diehard Rams fan?
Well, I'm hopeful. I think there's another way to sort of look at this is that they're making room also. I think they learned from last year. You can't put all your eggs in one basket like with Von Miller, right? And OBJ. So maybe what they're doing is that, and Tom and I are both in the same sort of thought process that you never know when players become available. And you want to be able to, when a player becomes available, you think it's a really good fit for your team and your scheme, you want to be able to pull the trigger. And one of the ways to do that is to get out of this whole, this cap nightmare, right? So that you can make those shrewd moves. I think that's another lesson they learned from last year, that they don't necessarily have to now wait, that they're going to have enough room that if somebody becomes available, they said, this guy is perfect for us, they can make that move and they can do it without hesitation. So that's another way you could take a look at it, because there's enough talent on this roster. They can be competitive. They will be competitive, right? If they can bring in enough complementary players to really support that, what we say are quote unquote, the core nucleus of this team, they can be competitive. And I think Kansas City was a great example, to go back to Kansas City, and Andy Reid. You can't pick and choose when you're going to win the Super Bowl, right? You have to be in it every year. You may not have your elite years. And look at the year we lost to the Patriots. No one picked the Patriots to win that Super Bowl that year, right? You have to be, it's sort of like the lottery. You got to be in it to win it. So you got to be competitive enough that when the opportunity presents itself, and I said that about last year, look how bad the NFC West turned out to be. If the Rams had hung on, they might have had a chance to be a lot better and be more competitive in that division. However, that being said, that's last year. You have to be competitive enough that if the opportunity presents itself, that you can run with the pack. So that's the other side of being a rebuild. I don't think they need to go into complete rebuild mode. I think they need to start looking at tweaking mode. They need to tweak this roster, get competitive, because last year was an absolute nightmare. And they have to be, and the one thing I will say is they have to stop with this talk about, I love McVay. I think he's great. Listen, if you want to retire, retire. It cannot be every year. Let's see if I like it. You know what? Then move on. And the same thing with the rest of the Ram players too. Listen, if you're going to retire, retire. The Rams can't be in limbo every year. What killed the Rams' hopes last year was they went from talking about repeating and everything else, and we know the Les Snead at the microphone in a drunken stupor saying we're going to open up the checkbooks, right? They went from that to like talking about I don't know if let's talk about retirement. I might have an ESPN deal as an announcer. And I think that really took away a lot of the steam going into the season. We talked about Jalen Ramsey in the podcast. So I think they need to refocus themselves. If you're in it, you're in it. That needs to be the message to the team. And that should be the message that the players bring to every season, because that wasn't the message last year.
Yeah, I agree. I was really getting tired of McVay's act at the end of every year, possibly retiring. Final question before we wrap things up. I know we're going to talk about the draft later on. We'll have a whole episode or two on the draft as the draft gets closer, and maybe we'll have another get together, another roundtable a week or two into free agency. But I'll just throw this question out here. Tom, I'll start with you. The Rams have a second round pick and 2 third-round picks. What is your guess? What 3 positions will they be drafting with those 3 picks? And I know you never know for sure what players are going to be on the board. But if it was up to you, what are the 3 positions you would be circling if you were Les Snead? I need to get these 3 guys. And it's a tough question for you because you already said, I'm not drafting for position. I just want to bring in great players. But if you had to pick by position, what would you pick?
No, maybe, yeah. I'm sorry if what I was saying is that I think they're gonna draft a lot of players, a lot of young players, as many as they can, and put them out on the field, right? As opposed to sitting them this year. They're going to let a lot of guys compete, a lot of guys get play time. Again, it's an audition for the following year, so they know what they have going into 2024, and they can be with all those minimum contracts on the books. It just gives, like Paul had said, it gives them a lot more flexibility for getting the right guy at the high end. But to answer your question, I do think they will. I think they're going to go after an edge with the first pick, and that's just the highest value position at this point in time. And then that's obviously their number one need, among their number one needs, if not their number one need. I think that at the inside linebacker front, they kind of got a lot of guys, that they drafted that are contributors. That's a great position for special teams. They got Roseman and Gervais and all these guys at that Hummel at that position. But I do think they're going to go in the get somebody like Kendricks or somebody like that who's been cut from Minnesota and plug them in there, a veteran next to Jones. I'm not sure that they're going to they'll probably draft some guys there, but if they do, it'll be in the later rounds. And then cornerback, you can't get enough of those guys and see how they compete. Kendrick didn't perform great last year. He turned out to be slow like everybody thought he was in the 6th round. Durant's the only guy that really came out of that looking good. Haley looked good early on. He got hurt, but they're going to need help there if they don't re-sign Troy Hill especially. So those are the positions I would say. And then, of course, there's always the offensive lineman if they can get a guy that they like.
How about you, Paul?
I'm going first 3 picks. So the 36, I'm going to try to move back so I can get another pick in the top 100. So I have 4 picks in the top 100. I'm going 3 pass rushers and a tall corner.
3 pass rushers. So
That's
you
right.
figure 2 of them will work out.
I got Clancy. I'm hoping Ojulari drops. I got Anadike Azuma from Kansas State, DJ Johnson, Tue Pelotu, my buddy from USC, right?
And DJ Johnson is the out of
Oregon.
Oregon.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Oregon player.
I read some really good things about him.
Yeah. So there are a lot of really in that bracket, that top 100 bracket, some really good pass rushers. They cannot go into the season with that pass rush like the way they had it from last year. And they got to bring in another veteran pass rusher, somebody who can really get it done. Remember, Leonard Floyd was number 2 in sacks for the Rams, like literally every season next to Aaron Donald. So that's very, very interesting. So if the Rams can bring in somebody, Graham from Philly's getting up there in years. They might be able to get him on a cheap deal. You never know. Houston, they're saying they can maybe get him on a cheap deal because he's getting up there in years.
You know who else? 3 free agents I'll throw at you that could play outside linebacker edge. Familiar names: Morgan Fox, Okoronkwo, and Sampson.
Sampson, yeah. Arden Key. Arden Key is another low-cost move that could maybe get like a couple of sacks. But corner also.
Someone had said how Aaron Donald makes average players great pass rushers, and Oko, actually more Morgan Fox is probably the better example. Oko kind of started getting it done late in the year with the Texans. But I don't know if you caught it. I mentioned it on a couple of pods. Sampson took a shot at the Rams, I thought, saying that, he went to the 49ers because he wants to be an edge rusher, and the Rams never let him be a pure edge rusher. So I don't know. You could take that 2 ways. Okay, come back now and you can be a pure edge rusher, or does McVay say, hey, you were kind of we didn't appreciate what you had to say about how we used you, so we're not interested.
Well, whoever comes to the Rams, they have no competition other than Heck. So they pretty much, got the slot to themselves.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay. Any parting shots? Anything else you want to talk about before we sign off here?
Yeah, I mean, let's ask. I'll ask the question to you guys. Who else is going to be cut or moved besides from the Rams after the maybe after the draft, or who's going to get cut?
Higbee.
I think so.
I think Higbee's gone. I think Higbee's gone. I think 2 things are going to happen. I think they're going to be like Tom and I love the whole street free agent scenario. Those post cuts, I mean, there's so much talent there, right? And then the whole Bradbury scenario, right? That happened afterwards, when he became available, right? Obviously, he was out of our price range, but I think tight end is a situation that you see in the NFL already. So they're just glorified large wide receivers in a lot of respects. So you have 2 types of tight ends that are in the NFL right now: the glorified, large wide receivers, and then you have the guys that can actually block. So the Rams need somebody, if they can plug in somebody who's solid blocking, can move the chains, I think they'll be okay. I think Bryson Hopkins can definitely play until Bryson Hopkins gets his confidence and his legs under him. Or, this kid, Darnell Washington, Tom, I don't know if you saw his combine. Darnell Washington, the kid from Georgia, the kid is 6'7", 265, runs like the wind, and cannot be tackled one-on-one. Now, I know tight end is not a glory position for the Rams, but if you can steal this kid, right, somehow bring this kid on, and look at the rookie implications, right? He's going to be outside of round 1, which is great, theoretically, hopefully. Oh, remove Higbee, and then you got Washington, Hopkins, and now we got our buddy Long for depth, right? That's not a bad scenario. I can roll with that rather than Higbee and his money.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the thing about those street free agents is that look what we just saw with Miami, right? And there's going to be a lot of existing tight ends moving because this is such a strong draft class for tight ends. So a lot of people are going to be targeting tight ends. They'll draft their guys, and then they're going to cut the guys that they have. So tight ends are going to be there are a lot of them out there. And Higbee, God bless him, and he played through a lot of injuries last year, but the guy's pretty much broken down and not a threat in the red zone. And I just don't see it. So I agree. Tyler Higbee is your prime candidate for your next cut. Any other long shots for getting cut?
I can't really think of any. I mean, the Rams have so many free agents of their own. I'd almost flip it and say, are any of those guys coming back? Nick Scott, Greg?
I think Nick Scott is coming back. I think they have no choice. They have to bring Nick Scott back. In that scheme, you need leadership in the secondary. And if you look at it now, without Ramsey, That's one thing that they cannot say. That would be schematic suicide unless somebody else pops up on their radar in the next couple of weeks. But I think you should bring back Nick. And Nick Scott has flexibility. He could play strong safety. He could play free safety. But what I like about Nick Scott, the kid produces. He produces. He has his fair share of big plays. He's solid back there, steadying influence on the field. I think that's the kind of player, and he's going to give you the hometown discount. So
Yeah.
you have.
I guess the only other player, if you're really trying to prod Tom for a potential answer, I would hope they wouldn't do this, but Rob Havenstein is a guy that they could probably save a little bit of money on, but that offensive line, they just cannot take any hits there, I don't think. I know he's one of their highest paid players, though, but he missed a few snaps at the end of the year. Other than that, he was a rock. Is there someone you were hoping that a name that we would come up with that you're thinking of? Or
no, not necessarily. I think that the only other candidate might be Brian Allen.
Yeah, Brian Allen.
Yeah, but it's neither here nor there really. A couple $1 million saved, but that's an example. Yeah. I think they like to move on from guys that are just injury prone like that are hanging around that they can't get. Especially you can't get any continuity. If Brian Allen's your starting center and he can't see, he's going to. Like I would say. The position on the field that you don't want to lose mid-game is the one, aside from quarterback, of course, is your offensive, is your center. Like that messes things up so bad. He's the signal caller usually out there. I think that's a position you have to have a guy that is going to stay healthy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. There's so many free agents of their own that they have. I think there's just going to be some really big surprises. Hopefully they're nice surprises and not bad surprises, but we're going to find out here pretty quickly.
There will be some surprises, and it will be all about clearing space for 2024. I'm absolutely convinced that's their strategy at this point. Everything they're doing points directly toward that. And it's not just clearing. I mean, they didn't save very much on Rams. They didn't save very much on Leonard Floyd. The point is, clear the space, clear the position for young guys to go out there and play and compete and find out who we really got for 2024. That's and then, hey, we got a bunch of minimum salary guys, $1 million each. Let them go play, let's see what happens. And we're not going to win. And those draft picks, by the way, I'm not saying they're tanking, but this is their way of resetting. Right? It's let a bunch of young guys play, see who we got, don't pay very much money, have a ton of take dead cap this year, take our lumps this year, and get ready for 2024. Have a ton of flexibility, like Paul said. We know who can play and who can't play because guys got on the field because Leonard Floyd wasn't out there and Jalen Ramsey wasn't out there and so forth. And the other thing I'm going to predict right now is that there are going to be a lot of guys that to kind of take the year off because of injuries. I think you're going to see some Matthew Stafford. There's going to be a lot of guys who are like, hey, you know what? I got a little bit of an injury. I'm going to sit a lot. They're resting up next year. If you're a veteran player, they want to stay healthy and get ready for 2024 because I think they have one more shot at this.
And that was a nice bonus for Stafford, right? Because he was coming in from the offseason. They were talking about his elbow. Right?
Yeah.
Think about that. He got a chance to rest that elbow. So that gun should be well rested this season too.
Yeah, and if they can protect him, he'll play. But if they can't,
they can't. They can't do that what they did last year, and we saw that. And same thing with Cooper Kupp. They can't do that again.
So going back to the question of let's just maybe as the last point here, Mark, is that if we think of Stafford as having only a couple more years left in the tank. This year kind of on a half resting year and then really going for it in 2024. Is it time to go after a quarterback? Because they have committed to reset that backup quarterback position. And so is it time to go draft a guy that they think could step in? Do they use one of their early picks for that?
Yeah, I'd be interesting to see if they were playing for a title this year. I think they would draft a quarterback later just for insurance against Stafford. If they're playing for the long if they're playing the long game, they may draft someone earlier. That's just my quick thoughts on that.
Right. Agree with
How
that.
about Thompson Robinson from UCLA as a backup and let him get groomed to take over? That kid's exciting.
Oh yeah. He was. Boy, he really came. He really hadn't played much football before he got to.
That would be a great pick. Late in the draft, you grab him and you say, "Listen, in a couple of years, this is going to be your spot," because that kid's exciting.
DTR, I love it. I would love it.
I got another update from my special assistant, and he's telling me that he's just grabbing this from someone else's post. It might be Jordan or one of the Ram reporters on Twitter. The Rams really like their young cornerbacks, Kobe Durant, Darion Kendrick, and we almost forgot about him, Robert Rochelle.
Let's stop that right now, Robert Rochelle.
Yeah. If they really like him, I wish they would have played him a little bit.
Yeah. Grant Haley's ahead of Rochelle on the depth chart, unfortunately.
There are actually a lot of really good corners in the top 100 this year in the draft. That, like Deontay Bags from Maryland, I really like. I think he'd be a great player for the Rams, a nice fit. But yeah, I don't know if Robert Rochelle's the answer.
Yeah, I don't think Robert Rochelle's the answer. But I think they might move Yeast into that nickel position, and then they run with it at Fuller and Quentin Lake. Guys, this is going to be a very young, especially on the defensive side. They're going to try and readjust their attack on the offensive side, score some points, but they're going to give up a lot of points too. And this year, and they're going to let those guys go out and play and learn and take their licks. It's just how think about that defensive side of the ball. Aside from Aaron Donald, who do you have that is a real true veteran player?
That's the thing. They don't have anyone, right?
That's it.
That's it. Youth movement. But Pete Carroll did the same thing last year, right? We saw Seattle. They went that same route. Everybody counted them out. They brought in a ton of young players. And you know what? And they hit about 80-85% on them.
Yeah, they did well.
That's what happened. Look, Seattle was fairly competitive. So there you go.
And it really puts your coaching staff to the test as well. And maybe something they'll embrace, bringing in 10 or 12 rookies and getting the challenge of coaching them up in your system really fast, as opposed to, the same old guys coming back year after year. So that's probably a fun thing for a coaching staff, something to get excited about, and telling yourselves, hey, we don't have to necessarily just get these guys ready for Atlanta this weekend. We're getting them ready for 2024, where we're going to make a serious run at a Super Bowl. Hopefully.
Front office test also. Let's see how.
Yeah. Les Snead, I think his last two drafts have been not convincing. I mean, the jury's still out on them, but I think they had a really good run there, and I think that coincidentally, that really good run may have petered out when those guys left for Detroit, right? I forget the gentleman's name. He was head of the scouting department, right? And that may have hurt them. It seems to have hurt them, but just trying to connect the dots here.
A lot of Falcon fans are saying, "We told you so."
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that's it for now, you guys. We'll get back together after the maybe a couple weeks. Let free agency kind of take place and settle in, and we'll have another chat if you guys are up for it.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Can't wait for the draft.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it out here. And thanks for joining us.
All right. Rams up.
That's going to do it for this episode. Remember, you can reach us at ramsuppodcast@gmail.com. Visit our website at ramsup.com. And don't forget about our YouTube channel. Our handle is at laramsup.com. Till next time, keep the horns up, stay safe, and have fun out there.
Music courtesy of the YouTube audio library. Tracks featuring Bar Crawl by Track Tribe, Buckeye Bonsai by Vans in Japan, and Crimson Fly by Hama Hama.